Hello and welcome back. In this final video for week 1, we're going to look at two issues. First, two flavors of functions that we can write, and second, the Pylint tool that we'll be using in the labs to encourage you to write programs with good programming style. So far all of the functions that we've written or defined ourselves have explicitly returned a value. They've included a return statement like we see here in the Fahrenheit function. So the return statement explicitly hands back a value to whatever code called the function. So we can use a function that returns a statement in an assignment statement, for example. So I could say result equals Fahrenheit of 42. And what this will do is it calls Fahrenheit, passing in the argument 42 to the parameter. The function Fahrenheit then does its computation and hands back the value that is the result of doing the conversion to Fahrenheit. And that value is then assigned to result. So result refers to the value on the computer's memory. And we can then use result in something like a print statement, for example. Okay, so if we run this, everything should be as you expect. You see a result printed out. So real functions, or what we're referring to as real functions, do include a return statement, an explicit return statement. Typically real functions won't do input and output, they'll just calculate a value. That's not always the case, but it's typically the case. And typically also real functions are named as nouns, so Fahrenheit is the function that is carried out. It's a good noun name for the function. Standard error, cube, square, functions we've looked at so far. These are named in terms of the function that they carry out. There is another flavor of functions that we've looked at that we haven't looked at so far, and these are procedures. So these are functions that do not explicitly return a value. Instead, they would typically do some input and output. So they do print output, for instance, and their names will typically start with a verb like print a table or compute results, and they're called without any expectation of a return value. So I could write a very simple function such as say hello. So this function is going to have no arguments associated with it, so the parameter list is empty. And what this function is going to do is print hello everybody. Okay. And this function has no return value associated with it. There's no return statement. So I can invoke the function by calling it say hello. And if I run that, as you might expect, it says hello everybody. I've called the function once and it has executed the statement print hello everybody. Okay. Importantly though, although there's no return statement associated with this, Python automatically gives a return value to that function. It is returning a value, and the value that it is returning is a value called none, N-O-N-E. So it'd be easy for me to, well, it's legal for me anyway, to print out the result of calling, say, hello. What will happen this time is I will execute the function say hello, which is going to print hello everybody, and then I'm going to print out the result of calling say hello. And what we'll see this time is two things happen. We get hello everybody, which is the result of calling say hello, but then we print the result or the return value associated with calling the function say hello. So we see none appearing here. You may say, where's that none coming from? Well, none is coming from the implicit return value of the function say hello. So even when a function does not explicitly return a value, it will implicitly return the value none. And this is a possible point of confusion for you if you think, if you see none appearing in some output when you're not expecting it, it's likely that you have accidentally printed out the return value of a function that's actually a procedure. It's a procedure that does not explicitly return a value. Experimenting with that in labs, experimenting with that in labs is going to be important to you, but also try to remember this particular piece of the video lectures if you see and are confused by none appearing in your output at some point. This is the explanation for it. Another thing that might cause you some confusion when working in the labs is that there is a slight difference between the environment we use for testing code in the labs on the quiz server and the behavior that you see in Wing IDE 101. Specifically, our labs, the quiz server, requires that the code you submit passes tests with Pylint, which is an automatic style checker for programs. So although your program solutions might work in Wing IDE 101, they can fail the style checker requirements in the labs. So to help you with this, we give you a pre-check option that allows you to check style before checking your submission for marks. Okay. So, for example, question 25 in Lab 1 asks that you write a function days in years with the parameter number of years that returns the number of days in a given number of years. Okay, so I might carefully go off and write my solution to this in Wing IDE 101. So I carefully return number of years times 365, and I use the test cases that are shown to me in the lab. So let's just copy the code from there. Okay, so I see from the lab that I'm expecting days, number of years, pass in 2, and print days to produce the result 730. So let's try it. I get 730, and if I pass in 10, I'm expecting 3,650. Let's try it. So both of my test cases pass. So if I now carefully take my code and paste it into the code runner environment, I think that I have passed all of the tests. But if I use the pre-check tool, I'll find the output down here says, ooh, error, sorry, but your code doesn't pass the Pylint tests. Okay, so something has failed in Pylint, even though in Wing IDE everything succeeded. And if I take care and read the message here, it tells me, ooh, I've got bad indentation, 5 spaces found. Aha. So Wing IDE was perfectly happy with that, 1, 2, 3, 4, but Pylint was not. And also, I was missing a function docstring, so I need to write a docstring here. So I'll do so. Whoops. 3 quotes, return the number of days in the given number of years. So now I have a docstring, I can run this again, everything works as expected, and I can take my function and paste it into Code Runner, rerun my pre-check. This time I've passed all of the tests, so I can submit it for final checking. Okay, and I've got my solution correct, so that's good. So you do use the pre-check in order to not cost yourselves any marks in the labs due to failing the Pylint tests. Some other Pylint rules are that every function must have its own docstring, every identifier must be at least 3 characters, except for I, J, N, and S, and we'll talk more about those later. Indented lines must have exactly 4 spaces, lines are limited to 80 characters long, And you must have a space around operators like plus, multiplies, or assignment equals, and after all commas. Okay, thank you very much for this week.